Norway is a European nation of 5.5 million people, while Venezuela is a South American nation of 30.5 million people. Each are very culturally different, but the two share one thing in common. Their economies have historically and are still driven by the primary sector, especially oil and natural gas. However, Norway is rich and Venezuela is poor. Why is this the case? Well, there are a lot of reasons why, and it's multifaceted. Norway and Venezuela are more alike than one thinks. Of course, in terms of climate, language, culture, and customs, the two are completely opposite. But in terms of generating revenue for their GDPs, both are quite similar. For example, each nation has or had a strong primary-based sector economy, one built on commodities like oil, natural gas, agricultural products, and fishing. Norway's economy was traditionally based on fishing, farming, and timber, activities rooted in the primary sector. For much of its early history, it was relatively a poor rural country. Things began to change in the 20th century, especially after World War II, as Norway developed a mixed economy with strong public institutions and embraced social democratic policies. The real economic transformation came in the 1960s when large oil and gas reserves were discovered in the North Sea. This discovery allowed the nation to become one of the wealthiest and most stable economies in the world. Venezuela's economy was once one of the strongest in Latin America, historically rooted in agriculture and cattle ranching before oil was discovered in the early 20th century. By the 1920s, Venezuela had become a major oil exporter, and over the decades, oil revenues transformed the country, funding modernization and boosting living standards. However, this heavy dependence on oil made the economy vulnerable to price swings. In the late 20th century, political instability and economic inequality led to the rise of Hugo Chavez, who launched a socialist revolution in the late 1990s. His government nationalized key industries and increased social spending. But when oil prices started to decline in the late 2010s, and especially during the 2014 oil price crash, Venezuela's economy was sent into freefall, resulting in hyperinflation, mass poverty, and a humanitarian crisis that continues today. Let's compare economic and human geographical data of Norway and Venezuela. As of 2025, Norway has a GDP of $576 billion and a per capita income of nearly $104,000 a year, fifth in the world. Venezuela has a GDP of $212 billion and a per capita income of around $8,000 a year, making it amongst the lowest in South America. In 2010, the nation had its highest GDP of $393 billion, and in 1977, it had its highest per capita income ever of $6,400 a year, equivalent to $35,000 today, which made it comparable to some European nations. Societally, economic dysfunction has created different health parameters for Norway and Venezuela. The Human Development Index, which measures health, income, and education within a nation, is 0.966 out of 1 in Norway, the second highest only to Switzerland. Venezuela's Human Development Index is 0.699 out of 1, classified as medium, and this figure decreased from a high of 0.772 in 2013. Correlated to this, Norway has a life expectancy of 83 years old, while Venezuela's is 71 years old, a 12-year difference. Norway has amongst the lowest infant mortality rate in the world, at 1.8 deaths per 1,000 live births, while Venezuela's is 13.8 deaths per 1,000 live births, nearly 8 times higher. Credit ratings, which measure the government's ability to repay its debts, is considerably different between Norway and Venezuela, with Norway having AAA credit ratings, the highest any nation can receive, while Venezuela's is ranked as selective or restrictive default, which essentially means it's close to bankruptcy. Because of these financial differences, Norway's extreme poverty rate is close to 0%, while Venezuela's is 53%, and individuals in absolute poverty, meaning lacking access to necessities such as food, shelter, and clothing, is 82%. Inflation rates play a key role in this, and both nations have different rates. with Norway's being currently around 3% and Venezuela's being 48%. But in February 2019, this rate reached a staggering 344,000%, leading to significant price increases in food and medicine, as well as mass shortages. Why are Norway and Venezuela miles apart when it comes to economic prosperity? Well, one thing is their governments. Many people perceive that Nordic nations like Norway have socialist governments, equating these similarities to Venezuela's system. But it's far from the truth. Norway practices social democracy, which combines a capitalist market economy with strong government programs like universal healthcare, education, and welfare. The government regulates the economy and redistributes wealth, but private property and free enterprise thrive. In contrast, Venezuela followed a model of state socialism, especially under Hugo Chavez, where the government took control of major industries, fixed prices, and centralized power. This approach led to inefficiency, corruption, and economic collapse. Take a look at the democracy indexes for both nations. Norway ranks 9.81 out of 10 on it, placing first out of any nation, while Venezuela has a ranking of 2.25, classified as autocratic and decreasing substantially from 2006 when it had a ranking of 5.42. When Hugo Chavez was elected president of Venezuela in 1999, he introduced the Bolivarian Revolution, a movement based on socialism, nationalism, and wealth redistribution. He nationalized key industries, especially oil, and used soaring oil revenues to fund social programs aimed at reducing poverty and inequality. Initially popular among the poor, Chavez gradually concentrated power by weakening democratic institutions, sidelining political opponents, and restricting press freedoms. Over time, he amended the constitution to extend presidential terms and gain near total control over the courts and legislature. When Chavez died in 2013, Nicolas Maduro became the president, and he continued Chavez's policies, and even became more autocratic. While the nation held presidential elections, they were seen as heavily corrupt and rigged in Maduro's favor, and he won the most recent election in 2024, sparking mass protest. Corruption levels between Norway and Venezuela are like day and night. Norway is among the least corrupt nations in the world, ranking 81 out of 100 on the Corruption Perception Index, making it the 5th least corrupt nation in the world. Meanwhile, Venezuela scores 10 out of 100, making it the 3rd most corrupt country in the world, only ahead of Somalia and South Sudan. Norway has strong democratic institutions, transparent governance, and independent judiciary, and a free press that holds leaders accountable. Venezuela, under Chavez and especially Maduro, became more corrupted in both public and private sectors. State-run companies, particularly the oil giant PDVSA, became sources of embezzlement and cronyism. Government officials often enriched themselves while basic services collapsed, and bribes became common for access to food, medicine, or jobs. Weak institutions, lack of transparency, and limited press freedom allow corruption to thrive unchecked. If a nation has lots of corruption, this only ends up hurting society, creating economic and geopolitical difficulties. History plays a role in how Norway and Venezuela became so different economically. While Norway is a constitutional monarchy with a king, it gradually developed strong democratic institutions, rule of law, and a transparent government throughout the 20th century. When oil was discovered, the country already had a stable system capable of managing wealth responsibly. In 1990, it established the Government Pension Fund Global, a sovereign wealth fund designed to invest oil revenues for future generations and protect the economy from price shocks. This long-term planning helped Norway avoid the so-called resource curse. On the contrary, Venezuela has a history of political instability, coups, and weak institutions even before oil became its major export in the 20th century. Thus, Venezuela became increasingly dependent on oil revenues without managing the funds correctly. This left it vulnerable to price shocks, corruption, and authoritarianism, leading to long-term economic decline. Is there anything that can derail Norway's economic success or change Venezuela's economic misfortune? Well, yes, both are possible. Norway is not immune to potential risk. One major concern is its dependence on oil and gas, which still makes up a significant portion of its exports. As the world shifts towards renewable energy and climate policies tighten, global demand for fossil fuels could decline, potentially reducing national income. Additionally, the government pension fund, while massive, is still tied to global markets and could be affected by economic downturns or financial crises. Domestically, an aging population may strain public services and increase welfare costs over time. Migration from other nations is another potential problem. Norway's foreign-born population is currently 16%, and this has increased steadily for the last 25 years. Immigration's impact on the economy is a mixed bag. On one hand, labor migrants help fill important job gaps and boost the economy. But some studies point out that non-Western immigrants might cost more in public services than they contribute in taxes, mainly because of challenges like lower employment rates. That's led to the ongoing debate about whether Norway's generous welfare system can keep up as the population becomes more diverse. Venezuela is currently very impoverished, but it doesn't have to be this way. The nation still has a proven oil reserve of 304 billion barrels, the highest of any nation. Yet, Venezuela only produces 801,000 barrels of oil a day, so around 292 million barrels a year. On the other hand, the United States has around 38 billion barrels of oil, but produces 21 million barrels a day, the highest of any nation. However, there are limitations in Venezuela for producing oil. International investors have pulled out due to political instability and debt defaults. Also, the United States, along with the European Union, has placed sanctions on Venezuela due to human rights abuses, democratic backsliding, and corruption under the governments of Hugo Chavez and especially Nicolas Maduro. So, geopolitically, there has to be a change to trigger interest in bringing back Venezuela's oil industry. This could have happened last year with the 2024 Venezuelan presidential election, where there was strong evidence that Armando Gonzalez, a candidate running against Nicolas Maduro, won the election. But Maduro ended up victorious, receiving 51.95% of the vote. Protests broke out, questioning the validity of the election, and it seems that more and more Venezuelans are getting skeptical of Maduro's government. The next presidential election isn't until 2030, 5 years from now, and there's no doubt that that election will be corrupt. A possibility is that a governmental coup will happen, potentially ousting Maduro's government. But even if that were to occur, the transitional government may turn out to be also authoritarian. The best likely scenario is that Venezuela becomes democratically stable, and this has to happen sooner than later, because if a stable democratic government is set up, the nation can once again increase its oil producing capacity, allowing revenues to flow in. Once this happens, the stable government can invest heavily in infrastructural projects to improve Venezuelan standard of living, and create a sovereign wealth fund to provide the nation with adequate funds for the future. Then, Venezuela can diversify its economy into other sectors, including the secondary manufacturing sector and the tertiary services sector. One advantage that Venezuela has is that it's located physically in the tropics, between 11 degrees north and 1 degrees north latitude. In fact, the Paraguana Peninsula is only 15 to 20 miles away from Aruba, which is a hot destination for tourism. Thus, the area is physically similar and aesthetically pleasing, and if developed, it can become a prime tourist destination. The whole nation has a 1,700-mile coastline with the Caribbean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean, which all have potential. While these are all hypothetical scenarios, Venezuela does have the ability to become rich once again. Norway and Venezuela have economic similarities in what they produce, but the outcomes for both have been considerably different. It goes to show you how geopolitical variations can play a significant role in how each nation has fared. Norway became a stable, strong democracy with low levels of corruption, while Venezuela became a strong autocracy with extremely high levels of corruption. Throughout the 21st century, both nations will see transformations, but what types are left to be foreseen. That concludes this week's episode. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you like learning about the world, you found the right channel. So be sure to subscribe to my channel, Urban to Earth, to view more videos. Until next time!